Shift your story, shape your world. Today we're stepping into one of the most misunderstood parts of well-being, spirit. This session sits inside our Spring Thrive cycle. This is where we focus on the science and the structure of well-being, but we approach it through the lens of the integrated self. Just to orient you within the full arc of this semester, so far we've covered the body, so stabilizing sleep, energy, and nervous system regulation. Then the mind, how attention, thought, and emotional patterns shape our experience. And today we're focusing on spirit. And this is where we reconnect with meaning, purpose, gratitude, and deeper fulfillment. When we talk about spirit, we're not talking about religion or dogma. We're talking about the structure that gives your life meaning. So the part of you that answers, why am I here? What matters? How do I orient myself in the world? If this label layer is unstable, everything else feels off, even if your life looks fine on the surface. To understand this properly, we need to kind of zoom out for a minute. So according to research, the self functions like an integrated system. And this research is based on Federico Fagin's perspective on the quantum integrated self. He views it as doesn't view it, he explains it like a color wheel, right? So that there's no differentiation between each of these aspects of self, that they're interconnected. So body, mind, and spirit are not separate, they're interdependent. If one is out of alignment, it affects the whole system. So here's how that breaks down. The body is biological and sensory, the mind is cognitive and interpretive, and the spirit is meaning-making and values-based. This is the layer that organizes everything else. If your meaning system is unstable, your thoughts and behaviors will follow that instability. And what's important here is that these domains overlap. So you can see in this infographic, behavior sits between body and mind. So your body and mind, as they interact together, predict your behavior. Meaning sits between mind and spirit. So your mind and spirit functioning together create your meaning. And your authenticity sits between spirit and body. Right? So that's how you actually physically embody in the world. So when we work on spirit, we're not working in isolation. We're influencing the entire system. So for the structure overview, this session is going to move in two parts. First, we'll walk through the core content, and then we'll move into a global assessment so you can map this onto your own life. So what does spirit actually map onto in the research? Across multiple sources, it shows up in 5 consistent variables: meaning, belief systems, connection to something larger, ritual and practice, and aligned belonging. At its core, this domain answers, why does my life matter, and how do I orient myself in it? So to really understand this, we look at Blue Zone research. These are communities with the highest concentrations of people living to 100 with low rates of chronic disease. What's important here is that this research isn't about willpower, it's about the environment. It's about understanding the lifestyle patterns, social structures, cultural norms, and shared belief systems. The regions that were studied include Okinawa, Sardinia, Loma Linda, very different cultures, but what they found were very similar underlying structures, and that was what was so fascinating about it. So the core findings, and here's the key insight. Drum roll, please. Longevity is not driven by discipline alone. It's shaped by the systems people live inside, which means well-being is not something you force. It's something your life either supports or it undermines. The key insights that the researchers walked away with were that these people were not chasing health. It's not a whole industry around it. They're living inside structures that naturally produce health, and that's the shift. So across all of these regions, we see the same patterns. So you can take some time to go through each of these slides to understand each of the different regions and what the findings were. But essentially the patterns that they found across all of the regions that where people are embedded in meaning, they belong to something, they have a role, they participate in rituals, they're connected to others in consistent and structured ways, they don't try to control life, they participate in it, and that changes everything. Singapore wasn't actually a traditional blue zone, but Brittner has explored it as a modern longevity model. So we can simplify this, and of course that's one of my favorite things to do, is to really tease out the threads that you can see running through all of the research. And it's that spirit is a system that orients you. And it has 5 core drivers. And those drivers are meaning, belief systems, connectual, ritual, and belonging. So meaning is a sense that your life matters, not intellectually, but in how you live. If this is missing, people don't feel lost because they lack goals. They feel lost because their daily life doesn't reflect what matters to them. It's protective, and it's shown consistently across positive psychology and longitudinal studies. So take a minute to rank or assess yourself in terms of your current meaning baseline. Optimally, you're looking like your life feels full of purpose. What you do on a day-to-day basis feels aligned and worthwhile. You'd give yourself a ranking of 6 or 7. Mid is I have a general sense of purpose, but I don't consistently feel it in my daily life. Or strained is I feel aimless or disconnected. I'm going through the motions without a clear sense of why. So take a minute to record how you feel in that domain, and then in the second part we're going to create a macro assessment so you can see how all of these work together and what you want to work on. So the second driver is belief systems. This is your framework for making sense of hard times, because you gotta know it, the hard times are coming. I used to think that hard times were because I'd done something wrong, and now I just understand that life is hard. If you look around, and I think the advent of Instagram has really helped with my understanding of that, is that really honestly the things that people are coping with and dealing with allows me to recognize that life is just really hard, and not necessarily because you did anything wrong. Sometimes it just happens. So without it, people default to overthinking, right? Trying to think their way into certainty. Our brains do not like uncertainty. A stable belief system reduces that internal noise. They reduce your cognitive load. And without this high capacity, women default to overthinking as a substitute for meaning. So take a moment to see if you can figure out where you fit in that spectrum of belief systems, if you're optimal, somewhere mid-range, or strained. So driver number 3 is connection to something larger. This is where pressure shifts. If you feel like everything rests on you, your system's going to stay in stress, right? If you're the only one, it's kind of hard to manage. Connection to something larger creates perspective, allows you to step back. It reminds you that this moment is not the whole story. Transcendence expands your perspective. Connection to something bigger reduces ego threat, increases your resilience, and buffers against shame, which is something that we talk about a lot in my work. So it's important to point out here that globally people have many different beliefs. And so this is not specifically talking about God or who you follow. It's talking about your connection to the greater collective identity, right? So take a moment to look and see how you fit within this baseline, optimal, mid, or strained. And take a moment to record that. So the fourth driver is ritual and practice. This is where regulation actually happens. And it's not through willpower, it's through repetition. Rituals create rhythm, and rhythm creates safety in the nervous system. Historically, this is a role that the church held for many of us. There were rituals, there were experiences to help people move through different landmark and life transitions. Wedding rituals, funeral rituals, all of those things help people make sense and create that rhythm that you know what to do and how to do and when to do it, that make you feel contained. Ritual regulates your nervous system. Repeated, predictable practices lower your stress hormones, create safety through rhythm, and they anchor your identity. So they're not nice extras, they're actually regulation technologies. They signal to your brain surety and that you know what to do and when to do it. It's really, really important. So take a minute to see where you fall on your current ritual and practice baseline, optimal, mid, or strained. And the fifth driver is aligned belonging. And this is the one a lot of people miss. It's not just about relationships, it's about aligned relationships. Yes, the data shows that even acquaintances, the more acquaintances you have, the more connection you have, the higher level of well-being you have. But it's also really important that within those relationships that they're actually aligned. Because misaligned belonging creates chronic dysregulation, especially if it's dysfunctional. So you end up overfunctioning to maintain connection within the wrong system. Belonging must be aligned, not just present. So the Harvard study of adult development makes this very, very clear. It's important that your relationships are safe, attuned, values-aligned relationships, and those are the ones that predict well-being over time. And so this maps directly around our work on moral injury, misattuned environments, and overfunctioning in unsupportive or toxic systems. Super important. So take a minute to contemplate where you feel you fall here, optimal, mid, or strained, and make a note of that. So when spirit is off, when this domain is out of alignment, you'll see it quite clearly. You see chronic overthinking, burnout that rest doesn't fix, loss of direction, staying in misaligned environments, and substituting productivity for meaning. So this isn't a mindset issue. This is a systems level misalignment. So across all of this, 4 patterns clearly show up. Meaning has to be lived, not thought about. Belonging's not optional. Time orientation regulates your system. And most importantly, systems always beat willpower. So pattern 1, meaning is lived, not thought about. It strengthens the meaning, ritual, and belonging, and the antidote to I know what I should do, but I'm not actually doing it. Pattern 2 is belonging is non-negotiable. This strengthens belonging, meaning, and connection. This is the antidote to I'll figure it out on my own. Hyper-independence cultures really focus on that. I can do it myself. And the reality is we do need community. Pattern number 3, time orientation regulates the system. This is really important because it's not something that people really understand and that they are explicitly aware of. So this strengthens ritual, belief systems, and nervous systems, and it's the antidote to I don't have time to take care of myself. And then the 4th pattern is that systems beat willpower. It strengthens all 5 drivers, so it's a big one. It explains why blue zones don't rely on motivation and people burn out when they try to just do it right. So this is where this becomes very real. Most high capacity women understand meaning intellectually, right? But they're not living inside systems that actually support it. So they end up overworking instead of contributing, isolating instead of belonging, and thinking instead of orienting. And that's the gap we're working on closing. So now we shift from understanding to awareness. We're going to map this onto your own life. So what you're doing here is you're taking each of those 5 domains that we identified, and those work pages where you put down whether you're optimal, mid, or struggling. And so you're going to look at all of those and color them onto each one of these spirals. You can also do it just on a basic pie chart, or you can create a bar graph just to see which one, you kind of get a global assessment on how you're doing. Maybe you ranked high on all of them and nothing's really needs support. Maybe you ranked low on all of them and you're like, oh my gosh, where do I start, right? So this helps you kind of step back and see how you're doing from a global perspective. And so once you've done that, I want you to identify the area that feels most expensive to you right now. So it's the one that costs your system the most energy. So it's not necessarily the worst or the most draining. Sorry, not necessarily the worst. It's the one that's most draining that shows up in your life on a daily basis. And so, Ben, I want you to ask yourself, what specifically makes this score what it is? And then what's one small shift you can make to bring it back into balance? You want to keep it small, right? These are micro shifts. You're not rebuilding your life all at once. You're not following all of them. You're simply reorienting it. Spiritual well-being is not about what you believe. It's about whether your life is structured in a way that reinforces meaning, belonging, and connection every single day. And that's what we're building. So that ends the content section of our quantum gathering. Once you're finished here, you can take everything that you've recorded and journaled through and move over to part 3, which is then taking all of this and moving it through the quantum process. And then finally into part 4, which is the SMARTS goals process where you really operationalize the thing that you're wanting to shift. So thanks so much for joining, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.